Welcome back to my kitchen. It is time to restock for the upcoming week. Last week I did absolutely no meal prep and it made a busy week that much more chaotic. Meal prep is something that I heavily rely on as we are an ingredients household. We really don't consume that much processed food, and this just makes our weeks so much easier. So I'm very excited to go into the week a little bit more prepared than last week. Something that I like to make from scratch at home are crackers, and that's because it's a lot more affordable to make them at home. If you're looking for something with really clean ingredients in the store, they are often really pricey and usually contain vegetable oils, which is something that we do try to avoid. So this week I'm making a really large batch of some Seedy Crackers. These are going to be super high in fiber, which is something that most of us are lacking in our diets. And these turned out really well. So I'll be sure to have the recipe for this, as well as everything else shared in this video in the description box down below. I'm starting out with getting a little bit of coconut oil melting in a pot, and to a large bowl I'm adding some rolled oats and some sunflower seeds. You could definitely get a little bit creative with this. Substitute in pumpkin seeds here would be great. I'm adding in lots of ground flax for that extra fiber, and I'm also adding in a mix of sesame seeds. We're doing white and black today. Because I'm trying to pack in a lot of fiber with these crackers, I'm also adding in some chia seeds, which are also a great source of omega-3s, and I'm also going to be adding in some psyllium husk. To season these crackers, of course, I'm using some salt and garlic. Now, you could just use plain garlic powder. I'm using some of my garlic scape powder that I made from last year's garlic scapes. Super easy to make. I just dehydrate them and then run them through the food processor until you've got a fine powder. I'm also adding in a little bit of black pepper, and then you could do fresh or dried herbs here. I am using a little bit of dried rosemary, and I'm just crushing that a little bit before I add it in, but fresh would be even better. Mixing together all of those dry ingredients, and then I'm adding in some water as well as the melted coconut oil and just a little bit of honey to sweeten this slightly, just about a tablespoon. And then this gets mixed together really well. That psyllium husk, the flaxseed, and the chia seeds are going to absorb that water, and it's going to kind of thicken, gel up really quickly. So mixing that together as well as I can, and then this gets spread out onto a parchment lined baking sheet, and I press that out a little bit. And the easiest way I find to roll this out, since it is a little bit sticky, is to place a piece of parchment paper over top of the cracker dough and then spread it out with what I'm using as just a mini rolling pin, but you could also use your hands. I'm scoring the crackers before they go into the oven. That's going to make them really easy to break apart after they have baked and fully cooled. And then these are going to go into a 325-degree oven for around 30 minutes. It'll be a little bit less, a little bit longer, depending on how thick you decide to make the crackers. I'm also making a batch of 1 bowl oat flour muffins today, and this recipe is great because it just makes 6, so it's not a massive batch for the 2 of us, but typically if I make a larger batch, then just half of them would go straight into the freezer. This recipe is refined sugar-free, and I like to use Greek yogurt in it to up the protein a little bit. So I have some Greek yogurt in my bowl, and then a little bit of maple syrup. You could also use honey here, and an egg. Of course, adding in some vanilla extract and then some sort of fat. You could use avocado oil here or melted coconut oil. Today I'm using some melted butter. Whisking together the wet ingredients, and then before I add in the flour, I like to add in the baking powder, salt, and I add in a little bit of ground flaxseed here, and I whisk all of that into the wet ingredients before adding the flour, just to make sure that everything is really evenly distributed since I'm doing this in one bowl. Oat flour is my go-to for gluten-free baking. I love the way that it bakes up, and it's super affordable, really easy to make at home if you have rolled oats on hand. You just add them into a high-speed blender and blend them until you've got a really fine flour. For berries, you could use fresh, but I always use frozen. It's what I have on hand, and I'll use either mixed berries, raspberries, or blueberries. Today I'm doing blueberries, and I like to keep aside just a couple tablespoons of the flour to mix with the frozen berries before adding them into the batter, and that is just going to help to prevent a little bit of the color from spreading. I do find it necessary to line my cast iron muffin pans, so I'm using just parchment sheets because I ran out of muffin liners, and this works great too. Those are going to bake in a 375-degree oven for about 25 minutes until they're golden brown. Once those crackers are lightly golden, those are coming out of the oven, and I allow those to fully cool on the baking sheet. That's going to help them to crisp up a little bit before I break them apart. Pretty much every week right now, I am prepping either hard-boiled or soft-boiled eggs because we have a ton on hand. And the easiest way to do this with fresh eggs is actually by steaming them. So I use a pot with a steam basket, and I'll just fill up the pot to the bottom of the steam basket with water, bring that up to a boil, add in the eggs, and then cover that with a lid. And for hard-boiled eggs, I'll cook them for 12 minutes. Once the timer is up, I just add those eggs to a bowl of cold water, allow those to sit in there for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then these eggs are super easy to peel. Protein is always a focus of mine when I'm doing my meal prep, and this week I'm cooking up some of our Italian sausages from the pork that we raised last year. And my plan for these is to slice them up after they've cooled, and there'll be a protein option that we'll include with our snack plates, which is something that we often do for lunches. I'm also making up a batch of hummus today. I'm doing some roasted red pepper hummus, and I'm using my hummus chickpeas that I pressure canned. Of course, you could just do chickpeas with some roasted red peppers, garlic, tahini, a little bit of olive oil, and lemon juice. But these jars are ready to go, and it's really convenient. So I'll link my video for this in the description box down below if you want to check it out. But I can the chickpeas with the peppers in there, with the lemon juice, and then I'll just strain off some of the liquid, add the jar into the blender, blend this, and you've got hummus ready to go. It's really convenient. All I have to add in is a little bit of olive oil. I always like to have veggies prepped in some capacity in the fridge. Again, if they're ready to go, we're more likely to eat them. And I'm just prepping some with the intention of having these for our snack plates. So we're doing some carrot sticks today. I had some snap peas that I got washed up, and I also have some mini bell peppers. Slicing up some cheese. Obviously this does not take a whole lot of effort, but if I do this once, it's less dishes and less things to do throughout the week. So for these snack plates that we're going to have for lunches this week, it's going to be some of those Seedy Crackers. We'll have some cheese, hard-boiled eggs, some sausage, veggies, hummus, and then likely some dried fruit that I dehydrated last year. Having all of these components ready to go in the fridge means I can put together lunch in under a minute. Thanks for joining me today as I do a little bit of meal prep to restock the kitchen for the upcoming week. I hope it's a great one for you, and I'll see you in the next video.